Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This is part 2 of the DIY car alignment string system that I was designing for my personal vehicle. So at the end of the video in part 1, I showed you guys these parts that were 3D printed by my friend. And here we're going to go into more detail of what I had to do to make sure these work with the parts that I bought and to make sure that it works as a whole as a system. So here we go. So the first thing I needed to do was actually drill out the holes for the thumb screws that I bought off of eBay. This is because the holes actually printed a little smaller during the printing process, and so it just required me to go in with a bigger drill bit and just open up the holes so that the holes have enough clearance for the thumb screws to go through. And so here are the 10/32 screws that I bought from Home Depot, and I also bought these thumb screws from eBay. I'll post a link down below to the screws that I bought, the thumb screws that I bought exactly. But basically, as you saw in part 1, I designed the holes where the hex nuts go into to fit exactly where they need to be, and they just basically slip right into place, and then the holes for the thumb screws simply just go in and they just kind of thread in. So after doing that for the first one, I basically did the same for the rest of the parts, and some of them, because of the 3D printing, they needed some adjusting and removing some excess material because of the 3D printing process. But once that was done, as you can see, it pretty much replicates what I designed in SolidWorks. And so here, as you turn the thumb screw down, it kind of compresses the material and it just kind of threads into the nut. And as you can see, it compresses and gets smaller, and so when the square tubing is inside, it should essentially clamp into place and hold it down and secure it and prevent it from moving while I'm doing my alignment. So for the square aluminum tubings that I bought, these are from a company called Faztech. I actually got these off a website called Granger. We have a local store here in Hawaii, and so I was able to buy it off online and have it shipped to the store for me to pick up. And so these are essentially 1 inch by 1 inch square aluminum tubings. They come in different lengths, but I actually bought 4 feet length, so 4 48-inch length square tubings, and I calculated it so that the pieces that I cut are enough for me to assemble my entire string alignment system. So once I cut all the pieces, I just basically went back with a file and just deburred the entire edges inside and out, just to get rid of any raised metal, just so that I don't scratch anything and injure myself or get any cuts. And it was also because I bought these connectors, and so I wanted to make sure that these connectors from the company I bought it from fit correctly and they fit smoothly without any issues. So it's just a matter of just going back and doing it for all the tubings, just making sure they all fit and everything is good to go. After cutting all the parts and trying to do a test fit, I realized that I designed the squares on the 3D printed parts with a bit too tight of a tolerance. And so I had to basically go in and modify the parts by using a Dremel to open up the squares. And so I went down and got myself a routing bit for my Dremel kit, and basically I was going to use this to try and basically open up the holes, the square holes on the 3D printed parts, so that I can get the square tubings to fit. And so it's just a matter of just opening it up, test fitting with the square tubings that I had to make sure that it slides through, and then if it didn't, just go back and continue opening up the holes. And so it took a while, but eventually I got it to work, And so here you can see this is the first one that I actually modified, and I got the square tubing to slide through. As you can see, it slides pretty easily. It moves pretty smooth, and so I put the thumb screw in, and I was testing the clamping force, and so here I just kind of make it snug a little bit, just enough, and you can see it's providing enough clamping force to hold the square tubing. And so as I tighten it even more, it becomes harder and harder to move the square tubing. And so it just gives me more confidence knowing that the square tubing will stay in its place when I tighten it down as I'm doing my alignment system on my car. So with that, it was just a matter of repeating the process of opening up all the square holes on each of the 3D printed parts that I have, just to make sure that the square tubing is able to fit and slide perfectly. And I'll admit, it doesn't look pretty and it's not the cleanest job, but it gets the job done. And I'm actually having my friend reprint it right now with bigger holes. With that done, it was finally time to assemble the string alignment kit. And so I'm just reassembling everything, putting the hex nuts back into place and the thumb screws into their respective holes, and getting it ready for assembly. And so after that, I proceeded with assembly, and I basically inserted the parts and tightened them down. And so this is the long piece that spans the side to side. Again, putting in the thumb screws, making sure everything's tight. And these are the other pieces that go up and down. These are this is what's going to hold the conduit tubing that holds the string on. And so with that is the completed assembly of the string alignment kit that I designed. It's actually pretty light, to be honest. This is the rear that I also already fabricated and assembled before, but this is the front and the rear that I designed, and so it's pretty convenient and it's pretty light, and I think it works well. And so the next thing I need to do was actually create a groove for the conduit pipe that I bought. So this is actually 1/2-inch conduit pipe, as you can see here. This is usually for electrical, and I'm using this as a way to hold the strings as I perform my alignment. And as you can see, there's no groove for it to sit in, and so it's pretty easy to slip off. And so what I need to do is actually find a way to make a groove onto the plastic pieces, those black plastic pieces, so that it stays put. And so I'm just using my Dremel again, and I'm just using the sanding tool to just kind of create a groove into the plastic piece. And surprisingly, this actually works really well. So I'm just trying to make it deep enough so that the pipe actually sits nice and even. So as you can see here, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do, and it holds its place. It doesn't roll off like it previously did, and it should be enough to hold the strings while I'm doing my alignment. So the last thing to do is actually cut the 1/2-inch conduit pipes that I bought. I bought 2 of these, one for the front, one for the rear. And so normally these come in 10-foot lengths, and I need to cut them down because they're simply too long. So I cut them just over 7 feet, a little over 7 feet, and just made a scribe mark to where I wanted to cut them. And so instead of using any type of power tools like a bandsaw or whatever to cut the pipe, I wanted to make sure that the ends were actually pretty square when I cut them. And so I'm actually using a pipe cutter that cuts the pipe by just simply rotating it. And as you tighten the tool, there's a blade that rotates, and it slowly cuts at the pipe, and you just keep rotating it until it finally cuts through, and it gives a nice clean cut. and I just went back with a electrician's conduit pipe cleaner just to kind of round off the edges and remove any raised metal, and that kind of made it pretty easy. And so I just did the same thing for the other pipe, measured to the same distance, the same length, scribed it, and then also just cut it again with the pipe cutter. And it was pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty consistent cuts, and very clean cuts as well. And so the final step of the conduit pipes was to create these grooves where the string would actually sit in. And so I needed to make more than one mark, because in the event I wanted to use this on different vehicles, I could use the different markings to adjust to the correct width of the vehicle. And allowing more grooves in the pipe allows me to adjust for these different vehicles. And so I decided to make 4 marks, each one 3 inches apart. So it'll be 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, and 12 inches total. So there's 4 marks, and it's just a matter of marking it and scribing it and making sure that they all line up before I make the grooves. And so I'm just scribing it again just to make sure I have the right markings on each groove. And then I went back with the pipe cutter, but instead of trying to cut the pipe, I actually used it as a way to create a groove in the pipe itself. And so I just tightened it just enough, and I just did a few turns on the mark that I measured out. Just a few turns with the pipe cutter, and then you tighten it, and then just create a groove deep enough so that the string would sit in the groove. And so I'm using fishing line for my string alignment system, and the fishing string is very thin, and so it sits right inside the groove perfectly, and knowing that it won't slip out of the groove. And so it's just a matter of repeating that process for the remaining marks on the pipe. So tighten the clamp around the pipe, around the measured mark, do a few turns, check it with the fishing line. If it's good, move on, and then that was pretty much it. It was a pretty straightforward process. And then I just took a tape measure, and then I just went back after I was finished just to make sure that all my grooves lined up where I needed them to be, which they were pretty spot on. And so it was just a matter of repeating the process again for the other pipe. So I just transferred the measurements onto the next pipe, and then scribed it, make sure my measurements were correct, and then went ahead and redid the process again. And as you can see here, the grooves came out pretty good, pretty consistent with the other one I did. And so I'm just gonna show you real quick with the fishing line that when I make a loop and then it goes over the end of the pipe, it should just slide over, and then it just falls right into the groove, and it should hold its place while I'm performing my alignment on my car. And so that about wraps it up for this video, guys. I hope you guys found it very helpful and informative. And if you guys have any questions on the parts that I use or how I designed it, feel free to leave a comment down below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But these are just some photos of the alignment kit I had on my car, actually just before I cut the conduit pipe. So that's why they look a little long. These are actually the entire 10-foot lengths of the conduit pipe. So it won't look like this when I actually do my alignment. It'll actually be a lot shorter. But it kind of just gives you a rough idea of how it looks like and how it's set up on my car. And so be sure to stay tuned for that video where I actually do alignment. That's coming pretty soon. But yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video again. Feel free to leave a comment and like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos. So see you in the next video. Shoots! Boom.